outside Front Royal, Virginia, January 1865. The farmhouse was isolated and ramshackle. Sitting on a knoll, it commanded a good view of the road coming down from Chester's Gap and on into Front Royal, perfect for the use it was being put to now. The people who had lived there? Who knew? Off fighting for one side or the other, dead, or refugees fleeing the war that was slowly draining the life from the valley and had been doing so for years. The Union captain paced the floor of the front room, out of frustration mostly, his cavalry boots making a constant hollow clomp, clomp, as he endlessly, relentlessly moved back and forth across the wood floor. The room was bare, its contents long ago scavenged by conquering soldiers or more fortunate neighbors, so the footsteps seemed to echo throughout the empty rooms of the vacant house. The captain was tall and lean, built with broad shoulders and the narrow hips of a horseman. The angular features of his aristocratic face were, for the most part, hidden by an unruly and bushy beard that hung down to his mid-chest. His dark eyes were set slightly too wide apart, and an angry saber scar ran diagonally across his face from above his right eye, across the bridge of his nose, and down his left cheek, making him look rather fearsome. He held his long leather riding gloves in his left hand and absently slapped them into his right hand as he paced. Where could they be, he thought. I was a damn fool for getting mixed up in Eli's wild scheme in the first place. Abruptly, he stopped pacing, and with a free hand he drew a long, dark cheroot from his left tunic pocket. Holding it lengthwise under his nose, he savored the rich aroma of the cured tobacco, and his mind wandered back to the evening just before Christmas when he received the cryptic message from his brother that had started this whole deal. Virgil, glad to hear you've recovered from your wounds. I fear the cause I have been defending is lost, and you will find yourself victorious in the coming months. I have a plan to save our home from the tumult that will wash over the South at the war's end. Respectfully request a meeting with you to discuss my surrender and our partnership. P.S. I have seen the future in Richmond. Your brother, Eli. Virgil remembered his surprise. He had thought his brother was dead. The last he had heard of Eli was that he had been grievously wounded, if not mortally, at Cold Harbor. He absently touched his scarred face, remembering he too had been wounded not long after. The small boy who had delivered the note brought him back to the present by tugging on his coat. Sir, Captain, sir? Virgil looked down at the boy sternly. What, lad? Where did you get this note? Virgil stammered, trying not to let his emotions betray him. Sir, I was told if you were in agreement with the note, you were to tip me handsomely and come with me. Where to, boy? Virgil asked, digging in his pocket for a coin to give the boy. It's not far, sir. The man who gave me the note is waiting there. Here? Tonight? Yes, sir, the boy nodded slowly. Virgil stood for a moment, undecided. Eli? Here in Winchester? What a damn fool thing to do! His mind suddenly cleared, and he yearned to see his brother. The note mentioned surrender. Come on, boy. Lead the way, Virgil said, flipping the boy a dime and grabbing his coat and hat on the way out. The boy led him through the deserted streets, keeping to the shadows, to a stable not far from where Virgil had been staying. He's in there, the boy whispered, pointing to the stable, then ran off into the night. Virgil thought his brother must be mad, but cautiously moved towards the dark stable. The front door was ajar, so Virgil slipped silently through it, drawing his Colt sidearm as he did. The stable was pitch black inside. Virgil could hear several horses skittering nervously. He paused to try and let his eyes adjust when he felt cold steel against the back of his head and heard an ominous sound of a pistol being cocked. A disembodied voice told him to drop his weapon, and when it thudded to the ground, he heard the door creak shut behind him. The voice warned him not to do anything foolish, so Virgil stood perfectly still. After a minute, Virgil heard a familiar hiss and saw a flash of light from a sulfur match, followed by a flicker and the dim glow of a lantern. He turned slowly and looked into the eyes of a short little old man holding a big Navy Colt with a big leering grin on his face. It's all right, Sergeant, a voice off to his side said. As Virgil looked over, he recognized his brother Eli holding the lantern. The figure was gaunt and pale, but yes, it was his brother Eli. The little man uncocked the big Navy Colt, and Virgil moved over as he and Eli sized each other up. Then they embraced. My God, Eli, let me look at you, Virgil almost shouted, holding his brother at arm's length. Dear brother, I thought you were dead. A wicked grin spread across Eli's face, and the little sergeant started to cackle. Virgil looked between the two, confused. What's so funny? He demanded. Actually, Virgil, I am. You are what? Virgil answered, more confused. I am dead, in a manner of speaking, depending on who you ask, I guess. Haha, don't worry, Virgil, I'm not a ghost. We're getting ahead of ourselves. Don't look so confused, Virgil. I will explain it in good time. Come on, brother. We have some talking to do. I brought a good bottle of wine, taken from one of the finest homes in Virginia, and some cheese. Come in the back and I'll tell you my plan. Virgil couldn't believe that was only a month ago. Now where was Eli? What could have gone wrong? Virgil turned and walked to the large front window and gazed outside. He looked down at the cigar he held in his hand as if seeing it for the first time. Grunting amusement at himself, he bit off the end and clamped it between his teeth. He had no thoughts of lighting it, he just liked to chew on them. The door slammed, and he heard heavy booted footsteps enter the room behind him. Anything, Sergeant? He asked, knowing who it was. No, sir. No sign at all. But begging the captain's pardon, sir, the sun is full up now. Sir, should we? He let his words trail off. Damn! Virgil exploded, startling the sergeant. Yes, Sergeant. I suppose you're right, Virgil sighed. Very well, Sergeant. Have the men get ready to move out. We've been at this fool's errand long enough. Yes, sir. The sergeant slapped a salute and turned to leave. Oh, Sergeant, Virgil said, almost as an afterthought. Sir, have the men ready, but leave the pickets in place till we're ready to move out. There's still a chance. Yes, sir. Very well. The heavy footsteps receded and the door slammed, leaving Virgil alone with his thoughts once again. Eli, this is crazy, Virgil said after hearing his brother's plan the first time. It can't be done, Virgil said, shaking his head. On the contrary, dear brother, it can be done. Everything on my end is set. I've dropped out of sight except for this new identity. I have the credentials and orders. A few members on the general staff have even known me under my new identity. All I need is some help on this end, getting through the valley and across the lines into West Virginia or Maryland. I even have help avoiding Mosby's guerrillas. Mosby, ha! Virgil snorted. He's dead, and his battalion scattered. Not likely, dear brother. Never discount a fox. He's not dead. He's recovering at his father's home, and he's due in Richmond inside the next month or so. Rumor has it at the general's staff. Although pulling this off before he returns to the area is a definite advantage. His men aren't nearly as effective without his leadership. Don't I know it, Virgil added. But that's a minor point, brother. It's not like we're stealing, Virgil. The South is doomed. And believe me when I tell you all the officials in Richmond are looking for something to hide away for what lies ahead. We won't be trying to loot the entire treasury, just enough to ensure a prosperous new start for our family and our men. I mean, brother, if this war has taught us nothing else, it should have taught us loyalty to family and our men above all else. I assure you, the amount we're after won't even be missed. By the time it is, the war will be over, and who will benefit then? I'll tell you who. The politicians and the vultures. Why not us? But our lands don't lie in Virginia anymore. They lie in West Virginia. Not so, Eli argued. The border straddles our valley. Who's to say the politicians won't change it? Do you want to take the chance? But it's treason on my part. You're stealing from a dying cause, but it's treason for me to go along with this. How so, brother? You don't think this is treason in Richmond? And how is it treason for you if we surrender and sign an oath of allegiance? It had been a convincing argument, and in the end Virgil had been won over. Now where was Eli? Something had gone terribly wrong. Damn. Virgil turned and headed purposefully towards the door, pulling on his gloves and clamping the chair tightly between his teeth. As he stepped out into the chilly morning air, he noticed the weather was breaking, and it didn't look so ominous to the west. The sergeant strode up and snapped a crisp salute, which Virgil returned casually. Sir, the men are ready to pull out, sir. Thank you, Sergeant. Looks like the weather's gonna break. Maybe it won't be so bad today after all. Yes, sir. I hope the captain's right, sir. Just then, one of the pickets came riding up the trail to the house and pulled to a hasty stop in front of the captain. Sir, riders coming down the road from the mountain. Very well, son. How many? Virgil said in a soothing voice, trying to calm the young man's excitement. 3, sir. Riding like the devil hisself is on their tail. He remembered himself and threw a quick salute to his superior officer. Well done, lad. Well done, Virgil praised. Sergeant, have the men hold to, but be ready to move on the quick. The riders were in sight now, moving rapidly up the knoll towards the house. Virgil withdrew his field glasses from the case over his belt and scanned the riders, breathing a sigh of relief when he recognized his brother Eli at the helm. At least, he thought, if all has gone awry, Eli is still alive. They waited patiently as the riders approached at full gallop. When they were close enough, Eli began waving wildly. He pulled to an abrupt halt and leapt off his horse as he came abreast of his brother and embraced him tightly. "Dear Virgil," he began excitedly, "you are a sight for sore eyes. I had feared y'all would abandon us." "I was about to, you damn fool. Where in the hell y'all been? The sun's up, for God's sake. We should be halfway across the valley by now. How far back is the wagon?" "Easy, brother, easy. It should be through the gap by now, I would think. We had a problem with the wheel. Couldn't fix it right till we got to the smithy. We managed to make do, but it slowed us down considerably. But Virgil is here. We are this close." He held up his hand, thumb and forefinger just an inch apart. "Everything went like clockwork, just as I had envisioned. Except for that damn able wheel, of course." "You really pulled it off?" Virgil asked somewhat in awe. He shook his head in mock disbelief as a wide grin spread across his face. Just then, in the distance they heard an echoing volley of gunfire rumbling down the mountain. The grins on everyone's faces were instantly erased, as they all feared the same conclusion. "Eli, tell me that's some sort of signal," Virgil huffed as he looked up the mountain. "I wish I could, but that can only be one thing. The gold's under attack." "Damnation!" Virgil cursed as he mounted his horse. Eli vaulted back into his saddle, and with Virgil yelling a hurried, "Move out!" they were off, back up the mountain into Chester's Gap. A stunned silence followed Charlie's declaration of gold in the wagon. Silently, everyone crowded forward as Charlie reached down and struggled to lift a bar out for all to see. He jammed his big knife back into the scabbard and lifted a bar with both hands. A dismayed gasp went around the wagon as the men saw the gold gleaming in the bright early morning sun. The men stood dumbfounded until Nick Carter got them moving again. "Okay, y'all, now that we have all seen it, we must now endeavor to keep it. Mr. Yates, Mr. Keith, how about you men watch down the road a ways? Those riders may have still been in earshot, and we don't know who else is about. Charlie, you had better seal that crate back in case we have to move fast. Lewis, let you and I and young Wilt here see what we can do for this Alum wagon here." After a close inspection, it was evident the wagon would need a major repair and couldn't be fixed in their present situation. "I ain't leaving this gold, Nick," Charlie said adamantly. "What if we lighten the wagon?" young Wilt added. "I said I ain't leaving the gold, boy. Any of it. I didn't mean leave it. How much does each bar weigh?" "I think I know what young Wilt is getting at, but it still won't work, boy," Nick Carter said sagely. "If we divided all these bars up between us, we'd need twice our number to carry them, and it would weigh us down grievously." "I don't mean all of it, sir," Wilt pleaded. "That wheel will last a lot longer with a lighter load, but we can't carry it all between us. But we can each carry one, and it wouldn't weigh the horses down as much as a fat man would." "I like the boys thinking," Lewis Powell added. "That way if something happens to the wagon, we don't lose everything and come away empty-handed." Nick Carter agreed. Charlie didn't like the idea very much, but agreed grudgingly, saying, "Let's get it done so we can move on." They all spent the next little while, each taking a bar of gold, wrapping it in their saddle rolls, and securing them back high on behind their saddles. "Good idea, Wilt. That looks to cut a good fourth of the weight from the wagon, and we still have Yates and Keith to give a bar to," Nick Carter stated, satisfied at their work. Young Wilt Binford beamed at the praise from the older veteran. "Speaking of Yates and Keith, here they come," observed John Perrier. All eyes looked down the road to see their two companions coming up the road at full gallop. "Wilt, get to the wagon," Charlie McDough ordered, taking charge again. The two men rode up in a flurry. "Charlie, we got big trouble," Francis Marion Yates said, wild-eyed. "Must be 100 Yankees coming up the road," James Keith exaggerated. The calmer Yates shook his head and added, "Ain't no 100, but there's enough of them, Charlie." "Well, Charles, we can't outrun them with this wagon, and it would be suicide for us to sit here and fight it out," Nick Carter advised. McDough looked at the wagon, then down the road, then back up the road into Chester's Gap. "We got to get the wagon back through the gap," he said, thinking out loud. Then he noticed for the first time that they were at a crossroads with a narrow road that skirted the mouth of the gap through the hollow they had attacked through, and a plan came to him. "Okay, listen up. Yates, you and Keith go with Wilt over that rise down into the dip there and sit tight. Wilt, have those two get a bar like the rest of us did. It'll give their horses a chance to rest, too. Lewis, you stay here. Let 'em see you. You know, like you got caught in the open, and lead them east down this narrow road here." McDough pointed east down the narrow road. "The rest of us will set up an ambush a short ways down the road. We will hit 'em and run like we were pulling rear guard action, buying time to get the wagon away. If they chase us, and they will if they think we got their gold, Then Wilt, you and Yates and Keith get back up through the gap pretty as you please. Try to get back inside Mosby's Confederacy. We'll head in through another gap after we lose the Yankees, and meet up at the ruins of Blackwell's place. Wilt snapped the reins and started off in the wagon with Yates and Keith following. What if they don't fall for it? Powell asked. Then we attack them when they set on the wagon, after they get down over the rise. Don't worry, pal, they'll follow. Charlie heeled his horse around and they started down the narrow road to set their ambush, leaving Lewis Powell by himself in the road. He dismounted and rooted through the pockets of the nearest dead man, so it would look like he hung back to scavenge from the dead. It might work, he thought, but he didn't like McDowell much. Good man in a fight, but liked to think he was too important. He looked at the roll secured behind his saddle. He could just ride off and still have a good share of gold, enough to start over. Go north, get out of the war. It wasn't going to last much longer anyway. He didn't have long to wait before he saw riders coming in the distance moving fast. Well, here goes nothing, he thought as he stood up making sure he was seen, then jumped into his saddle and tore off down the road, leading the onrushing Yankees unknowingly into the jaws of death.